Chelin and Agaricus of Colorado.
All right, so to start off tonight, we're going to talk about Agaricus. Well, actually, to start off, we're not. We're going to talk about citizen science and community science, and then we'll talk about morels, and then we'll talk about Agaricus. So I decided to do that because we're finding morels right now. Some of us are, and they're very hard to find, as we know. And so I wanted to show a few of them and give some tips. I also wanted to show some of the stuff that we found at the camping foray. Not camping foray, the last foray, sorry, it's in my mind. Give me a second here. So when we did our last foray, we found a lot of morels. A lot of people found the first morel, and we wanted to show the different ones because we found like 4 different morels and we expected to find one type of morel. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about community science a little bit because that's what a lot of this was. This is how we did what we did. So if you don't have iNaturalist, you probably should. And the reason why is because anyone can take a picture of a mushroom and put it on the internet. And then other people can come and use that data. And a lot of the data that I'll show and go through is all on iNaturalist. So when we voucher specimens for science, we fill out a voucher, we dry the specimen, we throw it in a bag, we document where it came from, and then if we can, we DNA sequence it. We send it to Willow and BL, our friend Kyle. And we also do things like the microblitz. So down at the bottom down here, we have the microblitz. This is every year. This will be the 3rd year that I'll be doing it. This is an easy way to get your stuff DNA sequenced for free. All you have to do is collect 10 specimens during that time period, dry them out, and then put them on iNaturalist, write down the number, and then you send it in. And then at one point, if the sequence works, your iNaturalist record will show the DNA sequence. So all you have to do is have the app on your phone, take a picture of the mushroom, hopefully top and bottom, hopefully in the habitat, and then you'll be able to send it off. And then you can contribute with everybody else. So I highly recommend that because it allows us to collect data faster and allows us to do more quicker. Without it, things would take a lot more time to do and figure out. And that's how I learned about a whole bunch of new species like this guy right here, Agaricus of. We didn't even know that it existed in Colorado until we found this, didn't know what it was. I dried it, sent it out, and I got lucky and got the sequence back. So now we know we have Altarpiece here. And then I can actually successfully identify it now too because I know what it looks like. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We're also going to have a scientific collections foray on June 29th with Dr. Amy Honan. We don't know where we'll do it here, but somewhere close to the Springs. So anyone who's interested in doing scientific collections, via iNaturalist, taking the pictures, vouchering, and then we'll send it out to be DNA sequence, everything that we find. Everything. We're looking for rare stuff, so we want to find the rarer things, not the things that we already know what they are. But anyone who wants to join that foray can. And then also, the microblitz is actually something that more people should do because it's a free, easy way to get your stuff sequenced and be a part of the community science.
Can you tell more details about the microblitz?
What would you like to know?
Where is it? How do you join?
It's on iNaturalist as a project, and so Stephen Russell heads that up. He does a lot of the sequencing for NAMA, and you can go on there and join the project via your iNaturalist.
Okay, so it's not like an event. It's like you just.
It's a community project that you can join up with, and then when you take a picture of a mushroom during that time, during that time frame, you can essentially choose the pull down menu to add it to that project. And then you'll get a number. You can print the vouchers right from the website.
What website?
There'll be a link to it there. It's Myco something or other,
Okay.
something that Stephen Russell has. So you basically join the project, you print the vouchers, and then as you collect mushrooms, you just fill it out what it is. Very much like this. You dry it, throw it in a Ziploc bag. You do 10 specimens and they're all free. And then if you want to do more than 10 specimens, they're $3 each after. So.
And it tells you where to ship them?
What's that?
It tells you where to ship them?
Yeah, they tell you where to ship them. back to Indiana,
Okay.
and then they'll do it. Eddie?
Do they take the whole specimen and voucher it, or do they just send you the DNA sequence back? So you just send a portion of what you collect, or do you send the whole collection?
No, you just send one little tiny piece.
Okay.
Yeah, so you don't have, like, this is too much. So what I do, like this guy, this is Agaricus of Colorado. So what I did is I kept the majority of the specimen for my work, so I can still do microscopy on it. I can still run it again if I have to, whatever. But you take one little tiny piece is all they need. You throw it in a bag, you throw the INAT number on it, and you send it off. And then if it fails, you still have your specimen. You can send it again if you need to. So this is our foray, our first foray of the year. This is a morel that we typically find, and we always call them blonde morels. So it was pointed out to me that, hey, we might have a couple different morels. What do you think? And I said, I don't know. They kind of look the same to me. It's yellow, right? And so this is what a lot of people think is Morchella americana. It used to be called Escalantoides, but that's actually not what this is. When we got back later that day, I was like, wait a minute. This is Americana right here, this blonde guy. But if you notice this one, the stipe on it's got wrinkles. And if you look at the stipe on this one, it's got a texture on it. It also, where it connects to the cap, it's a little different. So I suspect that a lot of people have been calling this Americana, and it's not. And the other reason why, we did the microscopy on these two, and the spore size is different. So we're trying to make a guess on what is this morel. The closest thing that I can key it out to is Morchella prava, but we don't know if that's for sure. We just want to figure it out. And then after the foray, we did a little digging around and we camped on this black morel. You know, down in the riparian area at 6,000 feet under cottonwood, and we're like, what is this thing doing here on a sandbar? It was the weirdest thing. And I've never seen that low. It just showed up, and we're like, what is it? So we don't know what that one is either. So these are perfect examples of what to collect for community science, because we need to know what these morels are. We only know what this one is. And this is why it's powerful. And I just wanted to show that because we found 4 different morels that day. And then here's another one. Unfortunately, whoever had that morel, I don't know who it was, I took a picture of it, and then I realized later I should have asked them to keep one of those. And I think these are actually Borneo. But if you notice, they have black ridges, so they're a lot different. And then this guy is another one of those gray ones, even though it's a little bit yellow. It's the same as this guy. The other thing is the pits are different on this one from this one. So morels are really, really tricky. And we're in morel season right now, so I thought it was a good idea to talk about it a little bit. And I wanted to share some of the information that we found, because we're learning new things every day. And you know, everyone wants to find morels and eat them, and that's the problem. That's why we don't collect enough for science, because we want to eat them all. You know, and I'm guilty of it too. Every time I collect them, I eat them. Right.
Can you please go back for a second? Sorry. Thank you.
Isn't that a cool picture, though?
It's a great photo.
You see the contrast. They're so
Clearly
different.
shows 3 different things.
Right. You know, and you can clearly see that this one looks a lot different than that one. But if you saw this one, you would think it's the first one. But as it ages a little bit, it's not quite as yellow.
Same habitat.
Same habitat.
Same soil, same tree species.
It's a mixture of trees, different cottonwoods.
Is that first picture, the middle one on this picture?
It's the same, it's a different mushroom, but it's the same species, I believe. Because we collected a
the
bunch.
lighting on the first picture before that, or?
This one has just turned grayer because of age, I think, and then this one was still just there. I spent time taking like 50 photographs of this thing while everybody collected all the morels. And so, anyways, I'm just happy that a lot of people found their first morel, because in Colorado it's very hard to find morels. Even experts are like, where are they? And then most years it's dry and we can't find them. We haven't had a morel season like this in many, many years, so we're lucky. Here's another one that's out. This is a higher elevation one, Chelin. You've probably heard of it. It's in this book. It's probably in this book. It's in a lot of books. Black morels are very difficult to tell the difference without sequencing and/or microscopy, but this one's pretty unique. Usually it's solitary, close to water, but this is one that you might find. It's a kind of a random mishap. You walk along water long enough and you might run into one, hopefully. These are coming up at higher elevation, so anywhere between like 7,000 and 9,000 feet. This is another one that is really common up at higher elevation, but again, they're hard to find. They blend in really well. But some tips on this one, look for dead Douglas fir. It's associated with Douglas fir, but they typically start fruiting when the trees die. So, you know, some scientists say this is a natural morel, and another one say it's a burn morel. I think it's a little bit of both, because I've seen it both places. And the key are dead trees. The thing is, in forest burns, usually the morels are prolific if the moisture is right the year after, maybe the first 2 years. And then all those other morels disappear, and there's like 4 or 5 different ones that fruit. Once those ones are gone, this is one of the ones that's left over, in my opinion, because it's still there with its host that's dying. And you know, we talked about this with Britt Bunyard, and the idea is these things are there dormant, and then when the tree dies, they lose their host. So what do? It triggers them to fruit and throw spores everywhere so they can move to a new host. And that's the idea behind it. One of the ways you can identify this really easy, even though the morels have this wrinkled stipe, these have a wrinkled stipe from a young age. So when you find them even small, they'll have a wrinkled stipe on them. And that's one of the easiest ways to tell that that's Snydery. Anyway, this was taken in the last week. So they do exist. They really do. I have proof. And they're very hard to find, but if you get up above 8,000 feet, probably between 8,000 and 9,000 feet in the next few weeks, you could find some, but you really need to find dead trees generally. They're very hard to find, but they are out there. And if you do find a patch, sometimes they're prolific. I've spent the last 15 years trying to figure this mushroom out, and I still don't have it totally figured out. And you know, most of us that are considered expert levels still have a very hard time locating this stuff. It's like, you gotta hike, you gotta cover ground, you gotta put in the work.
Can I mention that they are toxic in their raw state
They
or
are.
undercooked state, and beware of any false morels?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sebastian. That's our good friend Sebastian Tabibi here. He's the president of the North Texas Club, and he came all the way from Texas to be here today. I'm really happy. So if you have questions about mushrooms, he's a great person to ask.
I'm not really good at it.
He's good at all the other ones, though. All right, so we're going to get into Agaricus now, unless anybody has any questions. Good? So this is a project that I started on several years ago. I know Brian said I didn't know much about Agaricus before this book, but I disagree. I studied Agaricus for a very long time. All the common ones that you would find in Vera's book. I know all the most common ones, and that's what we'll start with first. We'll go through all the ones that are in the books, like Agaricus bernardii. But what happened was, even before that book, in 2021, David Aurora came out here, and he wanted to find Agaricus julius. And so Brian Barzee said, oh, I know where we can take him. So we took him out to find the mushroom, and you know, we kind of split up, and I hiked like 3 miles and couldn't find a single Agaricus, and I come back and they're right there by the car. And then, you know, he's trying to take pictures for his new book. And so we just tried to put him where he needed to be. Nobody really knew he was here. We kind of hid him, and we just took him places and tried to find the mushrooms he wanted. And then we found some Julius, and then we went further down the road, and then we found some Amicosis, and you know, we were talking about different Agaricus, and then there was Agaricus didymus actually, and I called it Silvicola, And he corrected me. He's like, no, it's didymus. And I was like, what? And he's like, no, didymus. And I'm like, so they call it didymus. And then I looked at that book. And then I realized they called it didymus in 2016, but we have like 10 different ones that look like it. So I was intrigued, and I was like, I need to know more. And then I was studying more and more and more, and then I became part of this book project right here. And somehow I committed to doing the Agaricus section. And when I did that, I kind of got hyper focused on Agaricus at that point. That's what really put me over the edge. Because I knew all these common ones, but I wanted to go out and take pictures of them, good pictures if I could. And then I wanted to sort them all out, and then I was doing measurements. And then when Ed took over the project, he's like, don't worry about centimeters, just make it small, medium, or large. And I went, wait a minute, I've been sitting here with a ruler all summer long, measuring all these things. And so I became a lot more familiar with them, even more so than ever. But I've always liked Agaricus. And so Agaricus, what are they? These are Agaricus arvensis right here that were in Brockmore Bluffs a couple of years ago. We actually sequenced those and they came back as arvensis. So what most people would think is it's a mushroom. So if you go to the grocery store, these are all Agaricus bisporus down here. That's what I'm holding in my hand. So you have cremini. These are the same species, even though this one's got a brown cap and this one's got a white cap. So portobello is just a more mature version of the cremini. So you look at these two and they're very similar. This one's just hasn't fully opened yet. And honestly, a lot of people like these portobellos because they can use them as a steak, especially vegetarians, my vegetarian friends. But what I find that portobellos are more expensive, they're bigger, but then the gills change color, and so they're a stronger flavor. So it's not for everybody. I actually prefer the younger ones. But these are all the same species. They're Agaricus bisporus at the grocery store. And if you look really closely, like on this one, it's starting to turn a little bit orange or red. I don't know if you can pass it around, but if you look at the stipe, you can see that staining color on it. And so that's one of the keys to identification. And we actually have wild bisporus in Colorado Springs even. And the first time I found one, I smelled it. I was at Colorado College, and I picked it up. I was actually studying the Bernardia as president. I was taking a bunch of pictures of these. I had tons of them. And then all of a sudden, I saw this mushroom that looked different. And I was like, wait a minute. And then I found a group of them, and they all had a brown cap. And I was like, oh, this is different. And I picked one up, and I smelled it, and it smelled just like the portobello at the grocery store. And I went, oh, I think I know what that is. And then my neighbor had a bunch of buttons in his yard, little guys. And then he had like 3 or 4 different Agaricus. He had a yellow stainer, he had this Campestris relative, and then he had some bisporus buttons. They were just little button stage. He was mowing the weeds and he found all these mushrooms everywhere. And he's like, hey, can you tell me which ones I can eat? And I'm like, okay. And I went over there and I took a bunch of pictures and we put them on the doghouse. And then I actually connected with Alan Rockefeller as he stayed at my house before Telluride, and we did a bunch of sampling for sequences, and we sent those out, and they came back as bisporus. And the ones from Colorado College, though, I labeled them bisporus, we sent them out, and someone put the wrong mushroom in the tube. And they came back as the wrong thing. And then I went, that can't be right. And then a year later, we sent a collection back out. I resent the same collection. They came back as bisporus, and I proved it. Anyway, to me, when somebody says mushroom or they hear the word mushroom, people who aren't into mycology, this is what they think about. They think about this mushroom. Either they like them or they hate them. It's one or the other. No, I don't like mushrooms, you hear a lot of people say, but they don't realize that there are mushrooms like this that are much more tasty, I believe. Yes?
Is there a reason why there's a variation of color between the white and the brown Agaricus bisporus? Because normally when I see variations of color in species, I think that they're different.
Yeah, I mean, there's some debate on that. Sometimes I've heard rumors that these aren't always bisporus in the store. Sometimes they're torques or other things. So I think they're just a different strain. It's just like you have all different types of magic mushrooms and they all look different, but they're all cubensis. That's my take on it. Another thing is that when I heard that, it was actually Michael said something about that. I went, wait a minute. I went to the store, I bought 2 different mushrooms, and I put them under my microscope, and I measured the spores, and they were the same.
Right, so I was thinking maybe it's environmental conditions that lead to the different colors.
It could be. I'm not really sure.
When is it supposed to lay? When it's not?
They're cultivated and domesticated, so.
Yeah, I don't actually have the answer to that. I'm curious myself, but I believe they're a different strain.
Here's a question I have. Do you think that there are wild bispores that have the brown color?
The wild life spores do have the brown cap.
Okay, so then are there wild ones that have the white one?
I've never seen one,
Okay.
and I'll show you that right now.
I also think that just to add the enoki, I haven't seen the all white enoki in.
That's right.
Right.
Right, so enokis are all white when you buy them at the store, but then when you find them in the mountains or down here, they're different. But I think they grow in the dark too. Anyway, what they are is they're decomposers though. So what they do is they take the grass or the pine needles or whatever, and they eat that stuff and turn it back into soil. And Bernardii in particular, this guy, if you ever find this in the city, you'll notice it's usually where the grass is dead. And I always wondered, like, is it killing the grass? Or is it just eating the dead stuff? And I think it's just eating the dead stuff. So I went to Colorado College the other day, and the grass is really green this year. But where I did see a few of these is where there was dead grass right on the edge, just like every time. So they're essentially eating the dead grass and turning it back into dirt. So a lot of agaricus have different staining characteristics, and that's how we identify them. Like this guy, Alyssa brought, I sat there smelling it. Smell is a big factor. Smell and staining. This one started staining red. And if you take Agaricus bernardii, which that is, and you cut it, cut a couple of these. This guy's got bugs. And you wait a few minutes, you're going to see this guy starting to turn already. It's starting to turn color. And that's the easy way to identify this because it's going to turn bright red. And that tells you what section it's in. So I don't know if you want to pass that around, but that's one of the ways that we tell right away, besides the smell. And Bernardii has a briny smell, but everybody's nose is different. Some people can't smell. And especially after COVID.
I have come up with a number of bullshitting you smell descriptions just to have on hand and ready for this.
Okay. But that one's like one of the most common ones in our city. It grows on medians. You'll see it driving down the road. It's just getting started. So if we get some more rain in the next month or so, you'll start seeing them everywhere. And last year they're prolific. They're all over the place. They're very short and stocky, these Bernardii, and we'll get to that next. But you'll see that flesh color with the mushroom being passed around, and then you can smell it. They all have a chocolate brown spore print, and so this is when I was with Ben Kinsley a few years ago when we were up on a foray, and he was like, "Look, man, look, there's a whole life cycle," and I was like, "That's really cool. Let's get a picture of that." And so you see the button stage, and then you see they turn pink, and then they go to brown. And a lot of people see something like, "Well, the bottom's not pink," but as they age, they'll change slowly. They always will have a brown spore print, though, chocolate brown. And I actually posted that on the internet, and someone argued that's not campestris. And I have news for them now. We've sequenced collections from that same spot, and they are campestris. They're the real deal. So, there's always arguments with taxonomy and what's what, and no, it's European, and there's a whole lot of stuff like that. But campestris really does exist here. We also have this guy, which is a relative, and I always thought it was, we always call it campestris or campestris complex or group, but these guys that grow down in the city from here to the east, most of them are called Agaricus brandeli, and they're just a close relative. They're really close. The ones up in the mountains and the meadows are the actual campestris.
Okay, so that one is campestris though?
This is in the same group. This is brandeli.
Okay.
It used to be called Argentius, but that's an illegitimate name, so this is the real name of it.
James, aren't there some agaricus that don't stain at all?
Yes.
They stay white?
These guys actually don't really stain. The ones in the campestris group don't typically stain. If they're very young and you cut them open, sometimes they'll stain, or they don't even stain, they'll just have a little bit of a pink blush right here in the middle. So we have different cap colors: white, yellowish, golden, tan. If you take one of these stems, they break freely from the cap. That's what that's talking about. And then oftentimes the gills actually start really light in color. So with Campestris, as soon as they open up, they're pink. But other ones like, let's say, Didymus actually comes like a gray color first. And then it goes to a pinkish and then to a brown. So they're all a little bit different. And depending on the stage, they're different. That's part of what makes them hard to identify, is that you look at one in the young stage and you can see certain characteristics, but then once it opens up, then it looks different. And a good example of that is this particular Bernardii is like big, it's fully fruited, and it's cracked. It's what's cracking on top. It's a very common characteristic of this particular one. But if you looked at the one I passed around and this guy, they're not cracked yet. But as they dry out in the sun, they'll start to crack, and they have a light tan color on them.
Are the yellow ones the only poisonous ones? And the rest are
That we know of. So there's one yellow stainer that we know of in Colorado, and it grows generally from here to the east.
I think more so the odor is more characteristic.
Yeah, the odor's a big part, but the staining, where it stains, is the important part too. And I'll show pictures of that here in a minute. So here's Agaricus Bernardii. Actually turned a bunch of these over, but if you notice, see, it's all where the grass is dead. So they were fruiting where the grass is dead. Where the grass was green, there's hardly any mushrooms. It's because they're eating that dead organic matter. So where do you find them? You find them in lawns, they're very common, fields. So right now, that's what we're looking. We're looking in the city, but you know, they're sporadic, and they're coming slowly because it's been cold. High mountain meadows, that's where Campestris likes to grow. Up in the meadows where the cattle graze, out in the open, right in the sun. I find our more prized ones grow under spruce and pine, like Julius. And then there's some that grow over tree line, and those are some of the ones we need to collect and find. But they're, you know, no one's looking for mushrooms over tree line, really. So it's something that needs to happen. And then at your local grocery store.
Wait, what season or what time of year are they growing about tree line?
In your summer months, like probably August.
In the big duck pots,
Okay.
under the trees.
But there is an Agaricus above tree line.
Mostly spruce.
But which trees is it?
I've never seen it, but we need to find it. So I put this together to give you an idea of how we identify stuff. So the first thing that we do is we go, okay, where was it? Was it in the mountains? Was it on a lawn? Was it down under cottonwood? You know, where was it? Okay, and then what does it look like? Is it big? Is it white? Is it brown? What does the bulk, look like? What is it shaped like? These are all important things. And for most of us, we can do these top things. It's the last two that are tough to do because, they take more work or equipment. So smell is really a big deal. This is probably one of the key things at times to differentiate. Like when you find Arvensis or you find the other yellow stainer, like they smell totally different. And they both have yellow. And if you don't know, you should just stay away from anything that stains yellow until you learn. And it took me years to learn this. So then there's the staining of the flesh, which I passed around. There's a couple of different ones, and you can see that one was really red. So that's an example of that. And then when it comes to microscopy, not everyone has a microscope, so you can't always do that, but spore length is one of the keys to Agaricus. So if you open the actual Agaricus book, you'll find that there's like charts in there, and it shows all the different ones, and it shows like a graph, and it shows the spore length on all the different ones. And so it's just another way to narrow things down if you can't figure out what something is. It's helpful. It doesn't mean everything, but it's another tool we have. And then with DNA, we read a certain area called the ITS, which is a certain region of DNA. It's only a little small part. There are many other parts of DNA that we could look at, but for these particular mushrooms or Basidiomycetes, that's what a barcode looks like. And that's generally what we use as a starting point. And so if you send stuff into the microblitz, they will do the ITS read on it. And this is what one looks like. And that's from Agaricus brasilianus that I actually got right over by Shine Mountain High School. So this is something that I started looking into when I started thinking about doing this. And, I've always thought, okay, I knew about agaricine, and it's a carcinogen in mice. And I went and I read all kinds of papers, and there's a lot of controversy, is it bad for humans? It's a carcinogen, what's the deal? And like some papers say one thing, and other ones say a different thing, and it goes back and forth. But the consensus that I found was that, as long as you're cooking your mushrooms or even storing them in the fridge for a few days, it starts getting destroyed. And it's basically cooked out for the most part. So it's really not an issue if you're cooking your mushrooms. And then the bigger thing that I would worry about are heavy metals. And so in the mycelium running book over there on page 106, it talks about that. It has all these different mushrooms, and it shows all these different heavy metals, and then it shows you which ones uptake what heavy metals that are sitting in their background. And I think that's really important, because if you're picking mushrooms in a place like next to a roadside, or on a lawn where they're treating it with chemicals and all sorts of other garbage, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. And so Agaricus do absorb cadmium more than anything. And that's probably why you want to avoid something along the roadside, even though some of us eat them anyway. But it's just something to know and be aware of. And I think of things like, brake dust or other things that are, floating around. And so it's just something to be careful of. The one that we do know that's in section Xanthodermati, that's the sickener, that'll give you gastrointestinal upsets, is because of this, I can't even pronounce it, hydroquinone. And that's what's causing the problem. The other thing is that bacteria need to break down some of the stuff before these mushrooms can fruit. And so they have a relationship with these bacteria and other fungi. So if you go to the salad bar and you get, some mushrooms that are raw and you put them on your salad, you're getting agaricine and you're getting bacteria and other contaminants potentially. So that's one reason you should not eat these raw. Well, several reasons. That's my take on it.
So the ones you buy in the grocery store are...
These are the ones in the grocery store.
Okay.
So they're going to have contaminants. They're also going to have, the ones in the grocery store are also going to have pesticides potentially. And that's why you should buy organic ones. So a lot of this is my take on things after years of study. So I believe the majority of the Agaricus of Colorado are edible. There's only one that we know of that will get people sick, but there could be more. We just haven't discovered all of them yet. We've discovered a lot of them, but not every one of them. I have seen a really bright yellow stainer in the mountains, probably about 15 years ago, and I've never seen it since. And I really want to see it again. And then I had someone else tell me that there's a mountain yellow stainer that's potentially in that section, but they had a mushroom put KOH all over it, and it just doesn't look right. So I'm skeptical. Until we find it, we don't know. So as I said, I don't think you should eat any Agaricus raw, and for the reasons I just said. The majority of toxins are destroyed by cooking. And then I think, Agaricus on lawns in the city are more likely to concentrate heavy metals and have pollutants. So they're probably better to be avoided. And then when you buy organic Agaricus, you're going to get less contaminants because they're not trying to spray stuff on it to kill bugs from trying to eat them.
But it'll stop the carotene in it, right?
Yeah, they still have agaricine unless you cook it out. And bugs love Agaricus, like this one's got bug holes all in it.
And how long do you have to cook them to get that out?
That's a really good question. Nobody really knows. I've heard something of like a couple hours to get rid of all of it, but I think once you heat it up long enough, you're going to kill 89% of it from what I've researched. Just by cooking them. Yeah, I'm not going to cook my mushrooms for 2 hours. This is when David Rohrer came, and his wife cooked 3 different Agaricus and put them on plates, and Wendy cooked them, and we did a taste test. We said, okay, which one do we like the best? And so they all had a different flavor profile. And you'll see that Agaricus amicosus is really dark. We talked about, yeah, that would probably be good paired with a steak. And then you have Julius up here, it's a little bit lighter. That's my favorite Agaricus to eat. It's a little more fragrant, it's just light. And then this one's Agaricus didymus. It turns this golden yellow color when you cook it. I like to put those on pizzas. So this is the map, or my take of the Agaricus that are in Colorado. This is from many years of research through, DNA sequencing using community science, and thankfully having connections with people like Kyle Cannon at the OMDL, and people like Stephen Russell, Alan Rockefeller. All these people contributed to helping me build this map. They got me connected and allowed me to speed up the process by getting sequences of data back and then going and verifying and figuring out what do we have here. And so, a lot of these we know already, but you'll see the ones that have a plus or a pound or a star, they mean different things. So the ones that are starred, these are probably new species. We don't know for a fact, but we're giving them provisional names. And so that's why you see the SP003. That's actually one that looks a lot like this guy right here. So it's a Campestris relative that we found at Palmer Park last year in a foray. It was out in the field, and I thought it was Brandali, which is what I think this is, but it's like really closely related. So we have two different Campestris lookalikes down here, and then we have the real Campestris up high. And that's what species Colorado 03 is. Then we have
Can
this.
I ask?
Sure.
I think you were just about to cover it, but can I ask why Xanthodermis is scratched out?
Okay. So that's a very good question. All of these books, including this book from the expert, all talk about Agaricus xanthodermis being in Colorado. And I disagree. And the reason why is because I've sequenced 5 collections now from different places, and they all are Malangellus. Now, there is one that's in GenBank that's labeled xanthodermis, but it actually is Malangellus.
And Malangellus has the same odor.
It does. It's a very close relative. It's described from New Mexico, and we have it from the juniper pinyon all the way down into the city, and it's all over the place.
So all of the other yellow staining arbences are edible?
Correct.
Nice.
Jessica, do you have a question?
I was gonna say, it's a dumb question, but have you checked the place where they, are there xanthodermis that they call xanthodermis at Denver that we have to check?
They called it xanthodermis, and it's Malangellus.
They resequence it now and it's Malangellus?
No, I've sequenced 5 of the different ones, and they're all Malangellus, and I believe that we don't have a xanthodermis here. Now, I'm still trying to prove that, but the more work I do, the more I see it. And there's actually one labeled from the Botanic Gardens in GenBank that matches my sequences labeled xanthodermis, but it's incorrect, I believe. I've made them aware, and I think that this is just important stuff that we need to communicate and do. So a lot of these collections that I have, eventually when I get done with them, I will send them up there to the Botanic Gardens to be in their rear. Yes, Beth?
This guy's got a question.
Okay.
I was just curious, is it possible to have hybrids between wing mushroom species?
Yes.
How common is it?
It's not super common, but it is common with certain ones, in the mountains especially. Yes. Some of the woodland Agaricus in section arvenses, there are hybrids between some of these. And it's actually, there's a hybrid in a Purtis, this guy right here. So that one's a scotioid, so it doesn't have gills, it doesn't fully open. It's evolved for dry climates to stay closed, and then the spores disperse differently. Now, the other thing I want to say is that there's several on here that are new. So, species Colorado 02, that one's only been found in my yard. And this is a unique species. I'm trying to get pictures of it. It's going to come up any day now, but we need more rain. I look all the time. They're like little yellow guys. And, I saw it year after year, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is a weird one. And then when we got a sequence, we found out that nothing matches it. And then also this one, Scott Ostuni sequenced a few years ago from Denver. And it's like a torque. It looks like a torque, and we probably called it a torque because we feel like we have more than one torque here. And it's very closely related, but it has a really low ring on this type. And it looks different, you can tell. So we'll see pictures of that in a minute.
None of the ones that are yellow staining that aren't in the Xanthodermatae, they are all pleasant odors, or?
So these yellow stainers are pleasant odors. These guys are pleasant odors as well. Nobody really knows the edibility about these because these are little miniature Agaricus and nobody eats them, but they're probably edible. And so I crossed out Xanthodermus just for the reason because this is my take on it. This doesn't mean everything's 100%, but there's a lot of data backing this up. So,
Sorry, I have a question too. Again, it's based on his question. Could the Xanthodermus or Melangellus crossbreed with, or what did you say? Not crossbreed. Hybrids. With one of the edible ones and render it in?
probably not because it would only be with stuff in its own section, most likely. So in this group, in the Xanthodermati group, maybe it's possible. But
So it would only be like within.
right, within the group itself. So it's probably very unlikely that it would hybridize with something in the Arvensis group.
So the toxin itself is what causes the odor?
Yes, actually, that is correct. That's
And
part of the cause.
total newbie, so you said smells good and,
Yeah,
Like-
unpleasant, don't know what.
so what's unpleasant, what?
Some people liken it to urine.
Well, they call
Okay,
it,
see, that's perfect.
all the books and all people say phenolic. I equate that word to like smelling like a chalkboard or like a library paste.
Oh.
And it's stained really bright.
Yeah, and so the way to tell when you find one of those is to actually take a piece of the stipe or the stem and crush it, and then smell it, and then it'll be more pronounced.
Okay.
And I wish we had one here today so I could show you, but we couldn't find any.
Some people throw it in the microwave for 5 seconds.
There's that too, or when you cook it, it can stink, and then some people can actually eat it.
Throw it in there if it does smell like it.
I was gonna say, you really want it like your microwave.
So basically, everything on here it is broken up into different sections. There are other sections of Agaricus, but we don't know of any that exist here in those other sections. That's why they're not on this map. But you can see all the basic ones that are known, and then the ones not previously known from Colorado actually have a name, like Sandianus. This one's from New Mexico. And so I found that last summer, and there's only been 2 times it's been found in Colorado that we know of. And then Nan Augustus, this is an eastern species. It's a form of the prince that's in the east, but we found it on a lawn last year by Palmer Park. So we never knew that even existed here. And I went through all the work to go find out what they have in Denver too, and try to figure out, do they have that in Mycoportal? And I searched every single one of these to find out. Pinionensis, this one I've never found here, but it is in adjacent states. And we have a lot of pinyon woodland here. So given the fact that it's in New Mexico and Utah and Arizona, it's got to be here. That's my take on that. And then Brandali, we didn't know that that's what it was called. So after I sequenced a few collections, now I know that that is here and it does exist here. What's another one?
Well, what about SPCO3?
That is, it's a Campestris relative. It looks like this guy. We don't know much about it. All I know is I got a sequence back and it doesn't match. And we went, wait a minute, that's a new one too. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of new stuff to discover. And I've discovered a whole lot of stuff by doing this, and that's what I'm here to do today, is share that with everybody and share it with the world, and then we'll take it further.
Have you taken spore prints and then tried to grow those out to get a cleaner sample and make sure they're not contaminated?
I have not done that personally. We do want to clone certain ones, like the Bisporus and a few other ones, but I'm pretty sure on the data that we're getting that they're not contaminated.
I imagine that some of them are really hard to grow because they grow in weird niches,
Right.
so they might not be cultivated.
Anyway, this is my take on Agaricus in Colorado, and there's a lot of new information here that's not in any book. And we're going to go through next all the common ones that are in all the books. Yes.
Does the substrate affect the DNA of the ocean?
I don't think so. No. Because it's still the same mushroom. Still the same genetics. So here's a wild Bisporus. As you see, it's got the brown cap on it. They can be variable in the wild. You know, the ones they grow here, they grow, you know, in a warehouse somewhere under controlled conditions. When I first found this collection, they were really shiny, and I was like, wow, why are they so shiny? You know, they're golden. And I thought that was really cool. But a real easy way to tell this one, not only does it smell like what's in the grocery store, and it has a brown cap and it's small, there's not a lot of mushroom or a lot of Agaricus that are in the city that have a brown cap like that are that size. And so here's some more pictures of it. I want to show all different versions. This is the one from my neighbor's yard right here. And so he showed me those and he's like, oh, can I eat these? And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, I've never seen this one look like this. And then when I saw this orange color right there, see that staining? That's what keyed me off to it. I was like, wait a minute, I know what that is. And I just made an educated guess. I wrote down Bisporus, I dried some. I was with Alan Rockefeller and we sent it out and I got it back and I came back as Bisporus and I went, hey, I know how to identify a mushroom. You know, so I was really excited about that because I knew that, you know, I was on the right track. Where these guys, I kind of knew right away just based on the smell and the maturity of them and the way they look. But from a button stage, it's really hard to tell. But it was the brown cap and the stain that threw me on that threw me onto it. But I wanted to show this because these are floating around, and for years I've seen brown cap Agaricus in the city and didn't know what they were. And actually, Mike Essam, who's here, he sent me a picture of one the other day, and I immediately knew what it was, just because of practicing and collecting them year after year now. They're really easy to identify, I feel. But these aren't in any books. I mean, even though this is the same mushroom that you buy at the grocery store, none of these books have it in there. Well, this one does. Only the big Agaricus book has it. And I think it's because so little is known about that in Colorado.
Do you think are these just different stages?
Yes, so this is the button stage. When they're really fresh, they just popped up. And then this is at maturity. They start changing the gill color. I don't have, let's see. This one's got pink gills, see? So these ones are pretty fresh. So it goes from button, these are still buttons, and then they start to open. And then after they open, then they start turning dark. These ones are really big. I never find one, you know, as big as the portobello in the wild, but it's probably just the conditions and what they're growing on.
Do you think these are like natively here, or did they escape cultivation?
I've always asked that question, but I think they're natively here because they're everywhere. When I found this collection, actually, that's the first thing that I started asking. But now that I start seeing them all over Colorado, all over the place, they could have escaped cultivation, but I don't think so, personally.
Yeah,
But
the
that's
golden
another-
oyster's gone crazy in like the east, right, and that one escaped cultivation.
I think it's thought that the Bisporus are escapes, and they weren't around 30, 40 years ago, but now they're everywhere.
Yeah, and that could be true. It's just a guess that I have.
I don't know if you thought about this, but would you recommend people throw mushroom butts from the store in their compost in their yard?
I would. I think it's great for your compost, but you might end up with mushrooms sooner or later.
So we're gonna have, I don't know, invasive.
I've composted a lot of mushrooms, and I never had an Agaricus pop up from ones that I composted. I usually compost stuff from, you know, that we collect on forays or what's left over. And I've had various mushrooms come up in my yard because of it, but never Agaricus. And I think they just need the right condition, but I've had some Leuco-Agaricus pop up in my old garden, and then also shaggy parasols. So here's our meadow mushroom. This collection was actually sequenced. This was from one of our forays a couple years ago up in Divide. And this was the collection that I first got back that told me we have the real Campestris, because I always wondered, is it real? Is it something else? Is it just in that group? Because all we said is, this is the Campestris complex. And that's all we said about these guys in the city too. But I noticed the ones that were down here, they're a little bit smaller. The stipes are a little skinnier. They look really close, but they're a little bit different. These come up in the pastures and meadows, especially where the cattle graze. And it's when it gets really wet. So, I mean, you can find them as early as June. I found some in June last year when it was actually cold. I went camping, and I went up to like 10,000 feet, and they were up there, and I couldn't believe it because I never found them at 10,000 feet in June. But usually, you know, August, end of July into August, they'll start coming up if we have moisture. This is Agaricus bitorquis. This is actually in my backyard. It comes up every year. And then I called another mushroom Pilosporus bitorquis because it came up in the same exact spot, just looked different because it was aged, and then I found out I was wrong. But if you look really closely here, you see this double ring. So they're short and stocky. They have this double ring on them. They can be confused with Bernardii, but these stain a lot brighter red. And then these also crack, and they turn this little bit of a tan color on them with age. And these are also more robust, so you'll notice these are really stocky compared to those. These have a little bit more, they're a little bit taller, and they're harder. But the bugs really like these, so I never get to them before the bugs do. But they'll be up pretty soon. Here's Bernardii in the button stage, and you'll see that they're starting to crack already. This is when I went to pick up my son from school, and actually I had to do something where I had to go in the school, actually. And I went to walk in the school, and I looked down, I'm like, wait a minute, there's Agaricus all over the place. And I stopped, and I was the parent out there taking pictures in front of high school. You know, and I sliced it with a knife, and I'm like, oh, check this out, you know. And
Coolest dad ever.
and I got this really good picture, you know, and I was really happy. But you'll see it's got the red staining, you know, it's a dead giveaway. And if you look at the way that these open up, and then the cracking top, and then they're a little bit tan on top. If you look at the bitorquis, I don't have a picture of the top, but they don't usually crack like that. And then they have this double ring, if you can see it. You can't always see it once it gets, you know, too aged, but you know, it took me years to try to tell the difference between these two. And there are subtle differences, and if you look at not only the bright red staining, this one, the torque can actually stain a little bit red too, a little pinkish, but it doesn't always do it. And if it does do it, it's lighter, and only when they're really fresh. These ones usually have even more of a dramatic bright red, like the one we sliced.
Do they have a cobweb annulus? I see the cobweb on that one, but does...
Not after they open. I mean, it kind of starts that way, but then it dissipates. But if you look for the cracking top, you look for the tannish color, the bright red staining, and then they smell briny. I mean, they have a unique smell to them. If you break a piece and smell it, they smell different than other Agaricus. And they like salt. So some people will say you don't really have to salt them if you cook them. I've never eaten one, but I know Ben back there doesn't like them.
They're gross.
And, you know, I don't usually eat them because they're found in places where they're fertilizing the lawn. So I just leave them alone. But one of these days I'm going to eat one. So here's your yellow stainer. This is what, if you look in any of these books, well, except for the new one, and this is where when I was doing the Agaricus in this book, I was talking to Ed up in Denver, and I said, hey, I don't think this is Xanthodermis, and I don't want to write it that way. And so you'll see the way it's written, it doesn't talk about Xanthodermis, it talks about what section it's in. And that's because I don't believe that it's Xanthodermis. Where's that page?
Is there any way
What's in the
to
poison
tell Xanthodermis from Melangellus without?
Geographic location. So Xanthodermis is prevalent in California. It's described from New York. So if you find a similar mushroom in California, it's probably Xanthodermis. I found it when I was out there in February, and I documented it. It's very similar. It's actually a little bit bigger. But it's described from the east, but it's very common in California. These guys, this one is from my backyard. This one is from a park in town. So this one has been sequenced from my backyard. And it came back as Melangellus. And then we ran several more. And it keeps coming back the same thing. And they can have a different look to them, but one of the key features is that when you cut it open, when they're, hopefully, you know, if they're too well aged, you're not going to get this yellow staining. And so with the yellow stainers, not only is it the smell, but it's where they stain yellow. So they stain yellow in the context, right here at the very base, with a stipe, but on the inside. Arvensis will stain a little bit on the outside of the cap. It won't stain in the context like this. So if you cut an Arvensis open like that, it won't stain like that. These always stain at the very base, bright yellow, like
It's
this.
a little hollow, is that a thing?
Probably. I mean, this one's a little hollow too. You know, a lot of Agaricus do this.
So,
In
so
fact,
they
Agaricus
don't,
altarpiece does it too.
they don't stain on top of the cap?
Not generally. Sometimes when they're really fresh, the actual xanthodermis does more. If you find them really fresh, they might, but the key is in the context, so inside of it. The other thing is that you'll see of these is that you'll see all different shapes and lengths. So these ones are really skinny. They were on a hill in my backyard. They were really deep, but they were more mature, so they sprouted up. When you find them young, they'll be shorter, and people might think they're different, but it's just the stage that they're in or where they're growing in the environment. And one of the keys that I find, besides the yellowing and the smell, is that they have a unique shape at the base right here. And you see these ones have a unique shape on them. And then if we go to the next slide, here's some more. So this is the same one that was before it's sliced. You see that little bump? And then you'll see the ring is like really thick. So it's got a thick felt-like ring. But this species is the same as this species, even though this one's really long. And if you look at the very base of it, they'll look at it. It's got that same shape to it.
Did we just not know about Malangellus when Vera's book was first published? Is that why it went in as xanthodermis?
That's what they've been calling it forever, but it wasn't until we had access to easy DNA sequencing that we figured it out.
So we knew that Malangellus existed, we just didn't.
We knew Malangellus existed in New Mexico. Well, I didn't know until we looked it up and figured it out. It was actually Alan Rockefeller who validated the sequence. And he went, oh, this matches Malangellus. And I was like, wait a minute. And then we looked it up and we went to Mushroom Expert. It's on Michael Coe's site. And he talks all about it. And he talks about it being in the pinyon juniper woodland in New Mexico, which is very close to us.
Do you know if the yellow coloration reacts with UV lighting?
I do not know.
I also
So,
always think of the caps when they're in in the right picture at the bottom.
yeah, this is like a deformed marshmallow
Yeah.
look, and that's very common. And that's why I have a bunch of pictures of these to see. There's so many differences in them, but you know, the keys are the smell, the yellow staining at the base, and you can see it clearly right there, and you can see a little bit on this one. And then you see the thick felt-like ring, and urban habitat. Oh, also the darker depressed center. Yes, Dana.
Okay, so folks, it's phenol. If you're old, you might know the antiseptic camphophenique,
Yep.
or like an antiseptic smell. It's not a pleasant smell,
No.
as opposed to the other.
And when I was a kid, my mom and my aunt would be like, oh no, you gotta put this on your wound, and then it would burn. And I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. No, I know the little green bottle.
Camphophenique,
Oh, yeah.
phenol.
But I wanted to show several pictures of this at different stages, because then you can tell they're always yellow right there. And then when they're young, you get this certain shape. It looks like a marshmallow, but a little bit more deformed. And then here's another one. This is from Palmer Park. So we found this at the beginning of the foray we did at Palmer Park last year, right when we walked in. And if you look really close right here, you see the yellow. Right there. And then you also see the ring is pretty thick. See the ring's like really thick? So sometimes our Arvensis can start off with a thick ring, but as it grows, it becomes a skirt that's thin. But this one's really thick and pronounced. You know, but depending on the environment, they might be a little different. And you can tell that they still have that marshmallow look. These are just really fresh. We also sequenced these ones, and they came back the same. So I'm convinced, but we're still going to collect more from all over and keep doing it. And so that's my take on it. It's Malangellus, not
Does
xanthodermis.
xanthodermis have the mushroom or marshmallow top too?
They look identical.
Okay.
Yeah, they look identical. I believe xanthodermis is more of a California species. And they have several in that section in California. So the majority of our Agaricus here that we find, that I'm aware of, are edible. And when I went to Southern California, that's actually where I'm from. I learned all the mushrooms here for 20 years. I went back and I started studying the Agaricus over there this February. And I collected all these different ones, and I found all sorts of ones in this section. So there's a lot of poisonous ones in California. It's a lot different.
Another total newbie question.
It's
You
okay.
put one of those in a bag with a good one. Have you contaminated all of them?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so here's Agaricus arvensis. This is the one that you saw me in the picture at the beginning. This was in Broadmoor Bluffs. I was out scouting with Jennifer Bell, and she said, hey, I know there's some mushrooms, on the way home if you want to look at them, they're Agaricus, but you probably don't care. And I'm like, no, I do care. Let's go look at those. So we went and looked at them. I sat there smelling them, taking pictures of them, pondering, going, okay, these two got to be arvensis. That's what I ID'd them as. We sent them out, I got them back, they're definitely their arvensis. Throughout North America, there are a lot of different types that are similar, and so they call other mushrooms arvensis, like, in the Pacific Northwest, and then also in the Midwest. So in the Midwest, they have one called crocodilinus. That's similar, but it has like this different pattern on the cap. And then Fisheratus is another one they've always called arvensis. That's more of a Pacific Northwest one, but it looks identical. But we have the actual Agaricus arvensis in Colorado. So we're still going through all the common ones. These are all the ones that are in the books mostly. So here's Amicosis. This one's always a treat to find because usually there's a whole bunch of them. I like this mushroom. It's big, it's fun to find. It's always under spruce at high elevation. So usually you're going to be over 10,000 feet when you find this. It likes the really deep needle duff. And actually, David Aurora set these up for me, and I took the picture, and he took his own pictures. So we found those that day looking for Julius, and then we set different things and took pictures, and you can see the staining right here. So it's got this reddish thing going on.
How do you say that? What is it?
Amicosis.
They look like they're popping up like porcini, kind of like with a shrub. Was that how they all were underground, basically?
Yeah, and you'll find them when you're looking for porcini because you'll be under spruce trying to find porcini, and then you go, oh wait, there's an Agaricus there. And to me, I get excited. I'm like, cool, there's something else we can eat. That's great. So here's some more. You might recognize some of these people. Here's Betty, who should be here, but she's not. She's one of our club members. She walked out of the woods on this camping foray. I don't know what she has in this hand, but she walked out of the woods with all these guys, and she's like, hey, what are these? And I went, where'd you find those? And I told her what they were, and I thought that was really cool. And then here's David Aurora looking at one. And I remember what happened is that he had Julius in one hand, I have another picture, and then he had Amicosis in the other, and he's sitting there looking at him, he's like, something's wrong. And I was like, they're different. He said, yeah. And I said, Amicosis, and he goes, yeah. And then he proceeded to take pictures, lining them up. So this section has a ton of different ones, and we've been calling them Sylvicola for so long, and this is where things get a little confusing. It's really hard to tell the difference between these, and it's probably going to take more than just looking at them to tell the difference at times. So these were actually found in Black Forest under ponderosa pine. But you notice they have this really big bulb, so that's one of the keys. I don't know exactly what species this is because we always call them Sylvicola, and then we started calling them didymus, but I don't think it's didymus. I think this is something else. And what needs to happen is we need to go to Black Forest and find this mushroom and sequence it, because we haven't done that. But there are a lot that look the same. They're all edible. They're all very closely related. And if you look at any of these guides, except for this one, all these older books will say Sylvicola in them. So here's our favorite woodland Agaricus. This is Agaricus Julius. We used to call this one the Prince, but it's not actually the Prince. The Prince is in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast. Agaricus Augustus, it's really closely related. And they smell amazing. You just got to beat the bugs to them because the bugs love them. They grow under spruce as well, and to me, this is the most exciting Agaricus to find in the woods. And hopefully we find some this summer. So one thing you'll notice is they always have a bulbous base. They have a unique cap color to them. And then if you look here, you can see the little bit of yellow. See how they start going yellow a little bit? And then this one is really young. So when they're really young, they have a shaggy stipe on them. And that's one of the ways to identify them. But once they stretch, then they lose that.
They get bugs real fast.
Huh?
I always see them with bugs.
Oh, yeah. The bugs get them before you do, almost every time. This is Agaricus didymus, and so we would always call it Sylvicola as well. And it's good to note that this mushroom and this mushroom were actually named in 2016. So a lot of those books have older information from before that time.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Like, I'm just noticing in edibility, a lot of them, or edibility are toxic, but you don't have choice edible. Is there like a reason why?
Oh, maybe I should.
Is you have choice? Oh, there's choice. I missed that.
I did.
Oh, there's best for the, yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, so,
Sorry.
yeah, this one's edible, but I think that, Julius is more choice, that's all.
I thought it was like you choose whether you want to try it or not.
So, there are a lot of different agaricus that look like this in the woods, and they're very difficult to tell the difference. This one I actually found in Evergreen last year and actually got the barcode back. The funny thing about this particular mushroom is that it shares the same exact barcode with 3 different ones that are all visibly different. So, Anapertus doesn't even have gills, doesn't even fully open. And that's where sometimes just that ITS region of DNA is not enough, because sometimes they can overlap. For the most part, it's good, but with this particular species, when it came back, it matched Anapertus all over the internet. And it's like, well, we know it's not Anapertus because that's something that doesn't even have gills.
It doesn't have gills.
Yep, this guy. So this guy doesn't have gills. It's a codioid, and it evolved to drier climates. So it's probably found down the 4 corners. I researched and looked deep to find out, has anyone ever found this in Colorado? And there are specimens in the herbarium in Denver. I found it in Microportal. So this does exist in Colorado. I've never actually seen it. It's very prevalent in New Mexico.
That's all the spores, the brown part?
Yep.
It's like a puffball.
Stephen Jones found some, and Sebastian Tadini found one when we were house sitting for Jen.
Okay.
So
I
found
think
three.
they favor high elevations because something about the environmental conditions causes them to become depressed as they're growing.
It's my understanding that these evolved to drier climates, and that's why they
Yeah,
stopped.
like high elevation dry climates.
Turning into a puffball.
Yeah.
So this is one that I want to find, but we know it exists. We know it exists all around us. We know it's been found here, and I'd like to find it just to have a specimen. But the DNA on this matches this, and they look completely different. And then there's also another one, Mesocarpus, and I can't nail that one down either. I can't find it, but it's, according to Rick Kerrigan, it's in that book. I've seen pictures of it. I found one that I thought it was, but it's not. So this is tricky stuff here. This one I found last year with Amy Honan. We were out by Leadville. There were no mushrooms at all. It was so dry, we couldn't find anything. And we went to hike to this lake, and we came down, and I went, there's a mushroom over there. And I went and I pulled it out, and it's where the squirrels had been, devouring all these spruce cones, and it was like the duff was this deep. And this thing was really long. And so I knew what section it was in, I knew it was edible. We took it back, and then we ended up cooking the top half of it, and I only kept the stem. And then I realized later, I'm like, oh man, that was a really important mushroom. Why do we eat it? And so now it's going to take a while to find it again. But this is only one of 2 iNaturalist observations in Colorado. So this was not really known in Colorado. There's one that was found in Breckenridge, and there's one that was found out by Leadville. These are the only 2 that are known. I'm sure there's more at times. We just probably assumed it was some other, in the same section. So here's another one in that same section, but look at the size of it. So this is the one I thought was Mesocarpus. This was on Rampart last year, and I looked through the notes, and actually Michael brought it to me. And I thought it was Mesocarpus, and I'm like, oh, that's probably what it is, and so that's what I called it. And then when the DNA came back, it came back as this provisional name. They're calling it Pacific Northwest 10 because they're finding it out there too. But according to Rick, the Agaricus expert, it's RWK, that's his initials, 2283. So this is another one that we would probably call Savicola, even though it was small, and just eat it. But the bulbous base is a key part too. I put it with a Swiss Army knife so you can tell how small that really is. So here's our Nanagustus. It looks just like the Prince, but this grows on lawns from here to the east. So if you find something that's big, I mean, it's pretty big, like a little bit bigger around than this. On lawns, it's probably an Anagustus. This was never known in Colorado until we found that mushroom one day.
When you say here, you mean this side of Pikes Peak?
What's that?
When you say here, you mean this side of Pikes Peak?
Just in our state. It's never been documented as being here.
What section is that in?
Arvensis.
What does it smell like?
It's like almondy kind of, just like all the other ones that are in this section.
Are Ventus the only almond smeller section?
No. Section Menoras are, the mini Agaricus smell that way too. So this is a different section now. So these are, I call them mini Agaricus because they're a lot smaller. And we have a bunch of those floating around. It took me forever to figure out what they were. I knew we had Agaricus carriganii here forever. I didn't know what it looked like. I couldn't figure it out. And then when Alan Rockefeller was here, he's like, oh, I know there's carriganii, let's find that, And he was set out to find it, he couldn't find it, and then we were on a foray, and he found this, and he's like, hey, come over here and tell me, do you know what this is? And I'm like, no, I don't know what it is. He didn't know, I didn't know. So then I vouchered it and documented it, we sent it out, and then it comes back, it's carriganii. So now we know what it looks like, which is really cool. So I put this picture here so you can see the size of it. I mean, it's a little small little guy. And I've seen him before, I just didn't know what it was. This is another one that I think is really cool. It's not in any books except for the Agaricus book, which there's one little section of a few pictures in it. And this grows down low in the ponderosa and gamble oak. And it's very, very fragrant when you smell it. And it has this little red blushing on it. And so I could never nail it down, and now we figured it out. So now when I find that, I know exactly what it is. This one is an interesting one because it was on our foray with NPR. Somebody brought it to Alan. He took a couple pictures of it, set it aside, and then later on that day, I didn't know, we were at my house, and I saw it on my counter, and I'm like, well, where did this come from? And he's like, oh, somebody gave it to me. And I'm like, what? And so I was like, well, it kind of looks like a Julius, but I don't know. So I just called it a Julius, and then we sent it out, and it comes back as something completely different, and we're like, wait a minute. And then I go and I look it up, and it was described from Spain. It's only known in Washington, Spain. So this is one that we need to find, again, because I'd like to do microscopy on it. But it's also in the small section, even though it was a little bit bigger. I'm asking, how did this Agaricus that's only known from Spain end up over here? I guess Washington too. Did somebody bring it here? Did the wind blow? How did it get there? But it's a new one. So this is from Palmer Park. We have a bag of them over there. They're all dry. They're like little tiny guys now. It came back as a subspecies, of Sylvaticus. We have a Sylvaticus group, so they're really bright red staining, and we have another one in the mountains that's white. And if you ever find it, it's like blood red when it stains, but it's got a white cap. And so this is a relative, but this is another one that's a really small one. And it was really cool. Chef Beth found it and brought it to Alan on the foray at Palmer Park. And when I got done coming down, he was sitting there taking all these pictures, and I was like, whoa, where did that come from? So that's another one that we have. This guy is the one that we were calling Campestris that grows in the city. I believe it's this one. Whoever brought this, I don't know who brought this in. Oh, you did? From your yard? Okay, cool. So that's what I think this is. This is Agaricus brandeli. If you look in older books, you'll see it's called Argentius, but that's an illegitimate name. And so the actual name is brandeli. It's named after mycologist Fred Brandel. And through DNA sequencing, we were able to figure that out. Before, we always called it Campestris, or Campestris group. It's all over our city. It's probably going to start popping up really soon. This one was known to exist in Colorado, but we couldn't find it. Chinodermis. I'd like to find some more mature specimens. Actually, our secretary, Jennifer Poe, found it. And I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time. I gave it a name, but then it turns out it's actually the Chinodermis, so I'm really happy that we figured out what that one was a couple years ago. This is the one that Scott Ostuni had sequenced a couple years ago in 22, up in the Denver area. And you know, in years past, we probably just call it a torque because it looks like a torque, but if you notice, the ring or the annulus is really low on it. And so that's one of the key characteristics of this guy. Really low. So torques don't do that. They're up higher and double ringed. So this is probably a new species. We don't know for a fact, but this is why it's got the provisional name. Species Colorado 01. Here's the one from my yard. As you see, it's really super small. It's got this yellowish color. They smell almondy and fragrant too, not Narvensis. This is the mini section. And I want to get better pictures of it. This is from last year. You know, in years past, I just saw it and I'm like, oh, it's just another Agaricus, and I didn't care. But now I actually care, and I want to get, you know, the perfect specimens. But by the time I find it, usually they start drying out because they're out in the sun. So this one, I believe, is also undescribed.
And is this something you could have named after you?
Well, we'll see where it goes, but this is the beginning of all that. Is I wanted to share this with the world, and then we'll take the science further going forward. So here's another one that looks like Grandeli, and that could be this one, but I don't think it is. It's dried. It's really close to it. So this one's in Palmer Park. So one of the things I do notice is that it's got this the lines going down the stipe on it. But this is the only one I've ever seen, or only one that we've ever proved that it's not Campestris or Grandeli. So this is probably an undescribed species. This is one I sent into the Mycoblitz, and Stephen Russell said he believes this is a new species, and I agree. This one's called Pilosporus. It grows with a torque squirrel in my backyard, but at a different time of year. And so I wish I had a better picture of it. It's closer related to Bernardii. So it's a red stainer. And it was actually been known in Colorado since 1904. Peck described it in 1904. So this is another one we need to find. And fortunately, it grows in my backyard, like 7 other Agaricus that I find there, which is ironic, but it's awesome. So I never knew about this one. And then when we sequenced it and found out it was Pilosporus, I went through the book, I went all over the internet, and I figured out that it was actually described in Colorado 100 and some years ago. This is one we found in Telluride last year. It's only known from Utah and New Mexico. And I didn't know what it was. And it's a little bit mangled because what happened was it was super dry, and then it got super wet right before we got there. There were no mushrooms, and this is one of the few mushrooms we did find. And it turns out it's a new Agaricus that we didn't know existed here.
How do you say the word?
Your guess is as good as mine. Oh, and here's all my references. So we're at the end, but so I referenced this book quite a bit. You know, the work that Richard Kerrigan did is amazing, and it helped me tremendously in figuring out a lot of this stuff. And then I used every other resource I could. Some of this other stuff are scientific papers here, talking about agaritine and whatnot. You know, initially, like, I would say it was almost 20 years ago, I read this identifying Agaricus thing from Ellen Jacobson up in Denver. It used to be on the CMS website. It's a very, very old thing talking about all the different city mushrooms and, you know, talking about smelling them and everything else. And that's what really got me started years ago. I was intrigued. I was like, I got to find these. I got to smell them. I got to know what's going on. And Ellen Jacobson is the resident Agaricus expert in Colorado. She's probably retiring or retired, but her work that she wrote on that page, which is, you know, just a page of basic Agaricus information in our state, really gave you the head start. And that's why I put this in here, because that's how I started. I also use some of these other websites for you know, looking stuff up. Michael Wood has a great website, but that's all based in California. However, a lot of the stuff is similar. And then I use iNaturalist quite a bit. I use Michael Portal to look up species to see if they have them at the Denver Botanic Gardens or not. So that way we know whether we need to be sending these things to the herbarium. And then also coloradomushrooms.com, which is my own website. So that's all I have.
Thank you.